My name is Patrick Dixon, and I'm the author of The Differentiating Personal and Tactical Dimensions of Head Coaches in the NFL. Why is Bill Belichick successful when others are not? So I wrote about football, wrote about Belichick's success, because it's something that, no one's really been able to explain. And whether I was able to do that or not is definitely shaky. But it's something that, is part of a multi-billion-dollar industry. So it matters to a lot of people.
Our planet Earth, a world of mystery and imagination, science and wonder that is constantly being gazed upon and unraveled by the finest minds humanity has to offer. Welcome to the UniV podcast, the show that presents a free-flowing conversation with those beings at the very center of the world of academia and research from all around the globe, with your host, Simon Holland.
Today on the show we have Patrick Dixon, researcher and author of the paper, The Differentiating Personal and Tactical Dimensions of Head Coaches in the NFL. Why is Bill Belichick so successful when others are not? This paper is available in the show notes to download, and I suggest you get in there and read it. Very entertaining reading on a very topical subject at the moment. Belichick is, of course, the coach of the New England Patriots, an American football team that seems to have conquered the whole system of American football. Loved or despised, the fact of the matter is that Belichick has the most Super Bowl wins of all time. So for this episode, we deep dive into American football, or Gridiron as we call it down under, and the statistical and probable anomalies of Belichick's coaching career with the New England Patriots. Before we get started, I'd like to say a big thanks to our sponsors, Book Depository. Book Depository has millions of books at the lowest prices with free delivery worldwide. They've got everything you can think of and are generally found at the lowest price. I do a lot of e-reading, but I still actually really love books. The tactile experience in building up my home library with a tangible asset I can pass on. I don't know, maybe I'm just old school, but there is some magic to a book. So for all the books and free delivery, go to Book Depository for the best deals on the web and free delivery worldwide. And if you click on the link to the show notes of the episode, you will help support the UniV podcast, as 5% of all sales through that link get donated back to us. The UniV podcast is also supported by Moodle. Moodle is the world's most popular online learning platform, chosen by over 120 million users worldwide, with a mission of empowering educators to improve our world. Moodle allows educators of any kind to create a private space online, filled with the tools that easily create courses and activities, all optimized for collaborative learning. Moodle is also open source, which means that you can download and run it yourself. It is super flexible, and the platform as a project is supported by a global community of developers, teachers, administrators, partners, and learners. Moodle is used by K-12 schools through to higher education sectors like universities such as Open University, Monash, California State, etc., through to businesses of all size, for example Google and the UN, because of its powerful tools and features. Get Moodle today at moodle.com. Now without further ado, let's get on with the show. G'day Patrick, welcome to the show. So this paper was very topical at the moment with the NFL Finals just around the corner. It's quite a monster. How long did it take you to write?
I started researching over the summer, so sometime in June or July, and just reading books, reading a lot of NFL literature. There's NFL historians, and just kind of getting a big background in the history of it all and learning about a lot of the old coaches. And then I started writing sometime in September and finished it around Thanksgiving. So end of November, turned it in, I think, first week of December. So it was like a 2 to 3 month paper.
And were you talking about it with your friends? Were they just like, would you shut up about the history? You just want to watch the game? Is it that kind of thing? Were you just that?
Yeah, a little bit. I get pretty immersed in a subject like this. So I wanted to talk about it all the time. And what's funny is my reader, so Professor Jay Conger, who's the head of the Kravis Leadership Institute, he honestly told me he didn't know really much about football at all. So he knew a ton about leadership and corporate leadership and all of that. And that's kind of why I was interested in tying him in with it, because even though it's not like a corporation, the NFL is this huge business, and you've got these leaders who have never been observed the way like a CEO of a big company has been observed. And that's what he does. But I care a lot more about football. So I wanted to look at these head coaches who are, making millions of dollars every year, same as a CEO, but no one's analyzing them the same way. And I wanted to know why not.
Absolutely. So you did this late in your career, so your college career, you played college football, right?
Yeah.
Did it
yeah,
change?
I played,
Did it change your understanding of the game after you've done it, and you wish that you'd done it at the start of your playing career?
No. I mean, I've always had a good understanding of football and the level at which I was playing, and I never really had aspirations to be a coach, so it was never a big deal to me. Like, I've never understood defensive scheme. I've always been an offensive player, so that kind of thing was never really a big deal to me. But coming to the end of my college experience and trying to think of what I wanted to write about, it definitely made sense to pick something that I'd always known, but I'd never really dove into completely. So it was interesting to really look at something I've been doing my whole life from a different perspective.
Now, so far, we're talking about American football, and there's probably a lot of people in the world that don't really know what it is, or if they know what it is, they don't get why they stop all the time and things like that. So for people all over the world, what is American football, and what is so special about it in terms of tactics and personnel, and why is it a $13 billion game? Why is it special?
Okay. That's a tough question, but essentially in football, you have two opposing teams, as in any sport. You can have 11 players on the field at any given time, no more. So you have your offensive team on the field at one time, and your defensive field on the field when the other team's got their offensive team. So everything's run in plays. So when the ball is snapped, that's the start of a play. And when the carrier of the ball is brought to the ground, that's the end of the play. The reason football is different than a lot of other sports is it's 11 players that have to each do their job at the exact same time for the exact same 3.5, 4.5 seconds. And if one person messes up, the entire play is ruined. So you have to rely on each other completely, trust each other completely, trust that your coach is telling you the right things to be successful, and trust that the people around you are doing the right things, because you can't see anyone else typically. You're just looking at the opposing team. So if I'm blocking for somebody, I have to trust that what they're doing behind me is exactly what they did in practice. So it's a unique game in the sense that one person can't, do everything, at least not at the NFL level. You might have an amazing running back, but without 5 offensive linemen in front of him that can block, that running back is going to be the most garbage running back in the NFL you've ever seen. And we see it all the time. There are running backs that are all pro players that go to a team that have these terrible offensive lines, and they look like college players out there. And it's because you can't just have a star player. It's a lot more involved than that.
So it's kind of like a 11-player basketball, rugby plus chess, plus a bit of Sun Tzu's Art of War and a lot of money.
Yeah, so I mean, here's the thing about basketball. There's 5 players on the court, but typically, whoever has the ball, if they can dribble around and make a shot, they can take over a game, score 45, 50 points. Kobe Bryant scored 81. You can take over a game, win it almost by yourself. You need your teammates. But in football, it doesn't matter how good you are. You have to have your teammates. I think it's similar to rugby in that sense. I never played rugby myself, but I have friends that play rugby at the Claremont colleges, and it's the same thing. You have to trust that your teammate's going to be behind you for that pitch or whatever you guys call it. And that on defense, that somebody's covering like the gaps where the opposing team might run. So it's a big trust game.
Yeah. And with the level of strategy and if you play anyone that plays Madden, which is the sort of computer version of NFL, you'd looking through the playbook, sure, and you're just like, what is going on with all these plays? And I guess that analogy to chess and the amount of strategies and counter strategies you can play is kind of alluding to what we're talking to, is why the coach is so important, particularly in NFL. I mean, boxing, you can give strategy and fight strategy and research, and there's lots of little dimensions to it. But there's a point where your guy's on your own. You push play and you just let it happen, and then you could get a little chat every 3 minutes or something like that. But NFL, it's a lot different, isn't it? Tell us a little bit about the role of the coach.
Yeah, so it's changed a lot actually over the years. So when the NFL began in the early 1900s, the coaches were players because there was no money in it. So the coaches were playing, and they were essentially going up to the huddle, which is right before the play starts, and they would just tell their teammates, who were also their players because they were the coach, they would just tell them, here's what we're going to do. And, some of them were very good at that, some weren't. And as time went by and more money came into football and coaches became separate from players, you've got coaches like Paul Brown and Bill Walsh, who all of a sudden are developing these super detailed strategies where they're game planning for specific players on their team to beat specific players on the other team and figuring out, weaknesses in the other team's scheme. So strategy has become more and more a large part of the game, especially because there's so much talent. You used to have a regular job and then you'd play football on the side for fun. That's what the guys did in the 1920s through 1950s. You couldn't just play football. Now, if you're good at football, you're making millions of dollars. So there needs to be a lot more thought going into it than just get out there and hit someone.
I've heard the role of a head coach or the position of a head coach in the NFL is one of the toughest jobs because of the lack of job security. So there's always hirings and firings. And what's the reasoning behind that? Why is that such a tough job to maintain?
So I'm sure you've heard the average tenure of a CEO at a company, I believe, is 3 years. And it's the same in the NFL as far as you're being trusted with, again, a team that's worth maybe $500 million, $800 million. And essentially, if you don't get it right, you're gone. And it's a cutthroat situation, especially when, you're expected to lead a team of, 51 players, your final roster. You're expected to lead these guys. At the same time, the average head coach salary is $4 million. You've got players that make $29 million in a year. So what does that say when you're supposed to be leading these guys and, 6 of the guys on your team triple your salary and your team is saying, basically the management is saying, they're more valuable than you are. You're the head coach, but you're not as valuable as they are. So Jim Harbaugh for the Ravens, he made, I think this was in 2016, he made $7 million. His quarterback, Joe Flacco, made $29 million. So how do you expect the level of respect to be between those guys? Obviously, Harbaugh is, got to be respected by his players to an extent, but no one respects Belichick the way Belichick's respected. And even Belichick makes less money than, some of his players. But I think it's just cutthroat because there's so much money going in, and it's an entertainment industry. People expect results right away. They don't want to wait to see their team win. If I'm going to pay $100 to go see my team play and they lose, forget it. Fire the coach. Get him out. Get me a new guy that knows how to win,
Let's talk a little bit about Belichick. I was going to get into this in the second half, but Belichick is probably the one person, if he had a jersey, you'd probably buy it. Or he'd have a hoodie, wouldn't he? He'd have a Patriots hoodie with his name on the back. And then
a Patriots hoodie with the sleeves cut off.
You'd buy that. You wouldn't buy an Andy Reid jersey. You wouldn't buy any other coach jersey. But Belichick is kind of, he's on the Mount Rushmore of great coaches, but he's also alone on a mountain by himself.
Yeah. In American football, you don't have jerseys for coaches. But, Belichick, the reason he's up there is he's won, 5 Super Bowls? No one else has ever done that. And he's doing it in a time when it's harder to do it than it ever was. For example, Chuck Noll won 4 Super Bowls with the Steelers in the 90s. He also had 7 first-team All-Pro players. Belichick, he'll play with anybody. He got rid of Jamie Collins in whatever year that was. Jamie Collins was an all-pro player, and he traded him away because Collins wouldn't do what he wanted him to do. And I believe they ended up winning the Super Bowl, So it's very interesting. Sorry, talking about Belichick.
What team do you go for? We should, in the name of good science, we should investigate whether there's a bias here, emotional bias.
Absolutely. I'm born and raised in San Diego, California, so I am a San Diego Chargers fan. And unfortunately, they're not the San Diego Chargers anymore. They're the Los Angeles Chargers. Bigger market up there, so management took them up there. Still a Chargers fan. Have always hated Bill Belichick. So it's actually really interesting that I chose to write about him. And I definitely respect him a lot more than I did before I wrote this paper.
And what didn't you like about him? What was his qualities that, I mean, aside from like the hometown, going for your hometown and against everyone else, what was the reasons you didn't like him?
That he's a cheater would be the main one. So that's pretty much going to be the number one thing you'll hear from people that don't like Belichick.
Yeah.
So anyone that talks about him that he's beat their team, he's a cheater. You know, it's an easy fallback for somebody that consistently beats you every year. And I mean, it's true. He did cheat a couple times, but so has everyone else. In the football world, I would be shocked if every single team in the NFL hasn't cheated. In fact, the year the Patriots were caught for Spygate, I don't know if you're familiar with Spygate.
They were using a lip reader to catch the plays on the way out or something, a lip reader in the crowd.
Yeah, I think, essentially, well, one of the things was they had cameras at the opposing team's practice facilities. So the other teams were practicing, and they had set up cameras to record them practicing. So essentially stealing their plays before the game, which is a huge advantage if you can actually pull that off, knowing what the other team's going to run. But, and then they also had people trying to read lips. Everybody does that. So at my college, we had players looking at the opposing teams, signaling their plays in, trying to figure out what they were calling before they called it. So everybody's doing that. But I think the camera thing got him into trouble. And so that's an easy fallback for a guy that beats you consistently every year. Everyone wants to say, oh, he's a cheater. When in reality, the year that Spygate happened, the Denver Broncos doubled the Patriots in the number of NFL, like they were caught cheating double the amount of times the Patriots were that year.
And I think anything where there's a lot of money at stake, there's always going to be cheating. But it wasn't really, as the Belichick head coach, it wasn't really like a Lance Armstrong situation where he's,
no,
he's got a team and
it's not like that. Yeah, he's trying to get the same competitive edges that coaches have been trying to get for years. There was I can't remember if it was George Hallis or I think it was the Bears and the Packers. They used to, this is way back in the day, but they used to invite teams to play at their field and then in the winter and put them in a locker room with no heating, no benches, no water, and they'd throw them in there and that's their locker room. And these guys are suffering before the game. And they're doing it just to get an advantage before the game. So it's been happening since the start of football. It's nothing new.
You probably make them angry and then they come out even harder. You don't want to play that. In that game.
Yeah.
And tell us a little bit. So you were talking about before about value of players and coaches and payroll and that kind of stuff. And I'm assuming that's because if you look at it from an economic point of view, you can sell jerseys or you can sell cards. Basketball cards back in the day were huge, or something like that. You have a marketing cornerstone around those franchise players.
Sure.
But how does a coach figure into managing an ego like that? Like from an outside, like if you've looked on a map of Australia, it's in the middle of nowhere. So it's kind of hard to have an ego down here because there's no one around to listen to you. But when you're on TV all the time, that's something that you really gets ramped up and takes it to the next level. So it's very noticeable when we watch TV and you hear like a Richard Sherman go off, sound off on his ability or something like that. But how does a coach navigate that and how does that whole sort of system work?
So I can tell you how Belichick sort of does it. So he's got this relationship with his players, with his organization that no one's been able to match. And it's, I would say mostly just an attitude. It's an attitude that the team comes first. You do your job, you get that done, and you don't come between the Patriots winning, because if you do, you're gone. And it sounds really ruthless, and it sounds like he doesn't care about anyone. But when you think about it in the grand scheme of things, say I'm a backup player on the Patriots. So I don't play, but I'm a backup. I might get in if the starter gets hurt. And Belichick says everyone does their job or you're gone. So you give 100% effort. So if that starter doesn't give 100% effort and I do, I know I'm getting in. If that starter also knows the same thing. He knows that Belichick is ready to fire up the guy behind him if he's not giving 100% effort. So the starter's ready to go too. And you get into these situations where, like I mentioned earlier, Jamie Collins, he was this outside linebacker, I believe, who wouldn't watch film and he would, quote unquote, freelance on the field. So he would do whatever he wanted, try to make big plays, be like this exciting player that made big hits. Belichick didn't want that. He wanted him to do his job so that the team would win. And that year they traded him to the Cleveland Browns. And the Cleveland Browns coach, Hugh Jackson, he said, "Oh, he can do whatever he wants. He's a great player. He can freelance for my team." Belichick went to the playoffs that year. Hugh Jackson, I believe, went winless that year. And Belichick gave him this amazing player because he wouldn't do his job. And he came between the team and the team's goal. So if Belichick is willing to do that, it says a lot to the other players in the locker room. It says, you guys mean more to me than him because you guys are committed to the team. And as long as you are, I value you. But as soon as you give up on this team and you decide to change your attitude and the way you're going to do things, you're not going to follow the rules and do what I say and do your job, you're gone. So it's ruthless, but at the same time, it's very loyal. You know what you're getting. He's telling you exactly what he expects. And if you do that, you're going to be just fine.
And I think there's evidence for him not being a cruel, not arrogant, what's the word? Like not being a sort of the coach that you hear about, because you look at someone like, there's a Super Bowl they played against the Seahawks and Malcolm Butler made a pick and saved the Super Bowl for them and they won it. But Malcolm Butler has made so many mistakes in key games and Belichick is stuck with him. And then that put him in a position to be able to make that play. When you add all the research and that kind of stuff, they thought it might happen. They sort of had practiced it in practice. And then that player had been given the amount of trust and responsibility to go and make that play despite making, being a kind of an average level player and that kind of thing. And I think that's evidence for the respect that Belichick has for his players.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, when you think about it, Belichick plays with some of the most average players in the NFL. I mean, Tom Brady's a great quarterback. Don't get me wrong. Great quarterback, amazing player. But look at what happened when Brady was hurt. I wrote about this a little bit in my paper. But Brady was hurt for all of the 2008 season or something like that. I have it here. The 2008 season. Brady tears his ACL in the first game, and they put in a backup who is an all-time backup. He's never been a starter at all, Matt Castle. And they end up going 11-5 that year. 11 wins, 5 losses. 11 wins, 5 losses gets you into the playoffs 99% of the time. Didn't get him in that year. They got really unlucky. They didn't make the playoffs. In 2016, Brady was suspended for the first 4 games of the season for Deflategate, in which they alleged that he deflated the footballs for the Super Bowl, blah, 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 whatever, super lame. The Patriots go 3-1, and that's with, I don't even know. That's with Jacoby Brissett and Jimmy Garoppolo. So you've got these backups who were nobodies at the time. Jacoby Brissett still isn't playing. Jimmy Garoppolo turned out to be an amazing quarterback, and he's playing for the Niners, turned them around. But you've got Brady, who's supposedly this amazing quarterback that you can't replace. And he played Matt Castle, who's garbage, and they went 11-5.
So what evidence do you draw then for the importance of having star players and having the coach? Like, is Tom Brady Tom Brady? Does Tom Brady have the Tom Brady talent, skills and career without being paired with Belichick?
I think it's a factor. Obviously, you pair a great coach with a great quarterback, they're going to find success, as you would with anything. I mean, two greats together is going to be awesome. But at the same time, I don't think Belichick is unsuccessful without Brady. I think Belichick is still able to do a lot of success. Maybe he doesn't win one or two of the Super Bowls he won. I think he still has 3. When you think about it, Brady got his start because Belichick is who he is. Drew Bledsoe was the starting quarterback of the Patriots, and Drew Bledsoe got hurt. And because of what Belichick preaches and what he teaches and believes in, he gave Brady the starting position. And when Brady was better, he let Brady have it. And that's like very unheard of. Very few teams will have the courage to have a starting quarterback, put in the backup, and then bench the starter when he's healthy. You almost always, 90% of the time, put the starter back in once he's healthy and ready to go back in. You never keep the backup in. And he did. And that just speaks volumes about his philosophy and how long he's been preaching that. That was when they started in 2000 or 2001.
And has he made any notable errors? I mean, the trading Garoppolo, someone that has been grooming for a couple of years and seemed poised to sort of continue the dynasty, to the Niners, that seems like a weird decision. What sort of, has he made any mistakes in his career that you can specifically point at, and how's he responded?
I'm sure he's made mistakes. I don't think trading Garoppolo is one of them. They got some great picks, and he knows how to pick players. I mean, look at the ability to pick, what's his name? Hogan, the receiver on the Patriots, who was a lacrosse player in college. If the guy has an eye to pick that guy for his team, he can pick players. But, for example, with Jimmy Garoppolo, that's a perfect example of Belichick saying, yeah, he's a great player, but is he essential to my system? And is he worth, is he worth keeping? I have Tom Brady. I can run my system with – Belichick preaches that you can run it with any quarterback, Obviously, some are better than others, but he's put into place this system on offense where he can throw players in, and they know what they're doing because he pushes them to the limit in practice. He teaches them. They study film. They know exactly what they're doing. So is getting rid of a backup quarterback that's pretty good going to really hurt you? I think that's strategy for him. I think he knows what he's doing. I think he has made mistakes. I think if you look at Spygate, absolutely, that was a big mistake. It was a big distraction. He talked about that in there's a 30 for 30, or it's called like a Football Life on Bill Belichick. And he was pretty emotional about that. At the end of the year, they lost. I can't remember if it was in like the NFC Championship or AFC Championship or whatever, but he apologized to his entire team about the distraction he caused by creating Spygate. And he knows that's his fault. He took full responsibility for it. And he basically admitted to his team, we didn't win a championship this year because I let you down. And that's why his players respect him, because when they win, he talks about, oh, this guy made a great play. This guy made a great play. They were doing this awesome. When they lose, he says, I didn't set my players up for success. Tom didn't make that throw because I didn't teach him how to make that throw, or the running back didn't hit that hole because I didn't push him hard enough in practice. It's never the player's fault. It's always his fault, and the players gain when they win.
And how does he continue to innovate? I mean, like you said, the whole team has access to game film, the whole league. Everybody's watching. Mm-hmm. And how does he, I think the key to success, like you mentioned in your paper, he's the winningest coach of all time. How do you stay at the top of your game, particularly in this era that's a lot harder than others? What has he done to innovate?
Definitely. I think a big part is that he's actually not a cocky guy. He's very confident in what he knows, but he's also very humble, and he knows that their scheme he might not know about. For example, Matt Patricia is one of the assistant coaches for the Patriots. And I can't remember what the other assistant coach that's going to get poached this year is.
McDaniel.
Two of his assistant coaches. Yeah, exactly. And McDaniel has been with him for a couple of years now. And both of them are going to get poached for head coaching jobs. They're both brilliant football minds. And the thing is, Belichick is humble enough to bring guys that successful onto his staff. A lot of coaches are actually afraid of that. They won't bring in guys that they think can challenge them. It's actually one of the things I wrote about in the paper is psychologically they want to be the top dog. They don't want anybody else to be able to challenge them. And Belichick is so confident and yet so humble that he doesn't care if he's not the top dog in the room. He knows he is. And he also knows he doesn't know everything. He can bring in Patricia and McDaniels, and they can actually teach him things, and he's going to use them because he's smart. There's videos of Brady walking into a film room with Belichick, and they're talking about this, and Belichick says, I want you to do it this way. And Brady corrects him and says, actually, this is what I saw. This is what I think they'll do in this coverage, blah, blah, blah. And Belichick says, you know what? You're right. Do it that way. And he's willing to actually do that. There are a lot of coaches who would say, you're going to do this my way. I know better than you.
And in a world of being humble opposed to ego, and listening, that's so essential. Because usually when people say you're right, that's kind of like the passive aggressive way to get you to shut up and go away. But he actually kind of really means it. He's like, you had a good look at it, and I trust you enough. And in terms of your economics background, I guess this is really analogous of all businesses. You got your CEO, and they sort of don't want somebody to challenge their position or challenge their authority. But this could be the one thing that Belichick does that's totally different.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And it's when you think about it, if you're the top dog and you're not willing to bring in people that do challenge you, you're not going to grow. And that's one of the reasons why he's so smart. Belichick grew up on film. His father wrote the book on scouting for football. His father was a great football mind, and he basically handed Belichick film as a child and said, watch this, break it down, tell me what they're doing on every single play. I want to know where every player is going. Belichick was groomed for this. His mind is made for this, and yet he's still willing to accept the fact that he needs to learn. And in every generation of new football coaches, there's been innovation in the game. Back in the day, it was all run game, and then you get to like Coryell era, and there's all this passing game, and then you get to RPO, and there's run pass option stuff, and the game's constantly changing, and he knows that. And there are coaches who want to say, I know what I'm doing, I'm the best, and I'm going to make that happen. And then there's coaches like Belichick who are willing to say, yeah, I know a lot, and I'm very smart, and I know the game, but things are going to change, and I want to be surrounded by people who can, analyze the game, figure out what the next change is going to be, and be prepared to use that for our team to win.
So that is absolutely like a good war general or a CEO of, like someone like Google or something like that, being responsive to changing markets.
Mm-hmm. Well, and it's the fact that he's not intimidated by these guys. He's surrounded by, like, Matt Patricia is probably going to be the head coach of the Lions next year. And he's not intimidated by Matt Patricia. He doesn't care. He wants Matt Patricia to do a good job. And as long as he does a great job, they're going to have a great relationship. And he might be the next great head coach. Who knows? But Belichick doesn't care. Belichick wants to win. And that's the thing, is if you're intimidated or you're worried that the next guy is going to pass you up, you can't focus on winning. You're focused on keeping that guy down. And it's the same thing as the CEO of a company. If the number two comes up with this amazing idea to build your company, build a new department, they're going to make you a ton of money. If you're so uncomfortable with the fact that they're coming up with something better than you and you shut it down, you just hurt your company. You're going to make less money. Whereas if you're confident enough in yourself and you let them and you actually help them build and push them to grow, it helps you in the long run. But you just have to be willing to be confident enough in yourself to do that.
So with Belichick as the commander, he's letting his two best sort of generals go, his field generals. Would he be worrying about, like you said, he wasn't worried, but they're taking all his information, all his tactics, all his strategy from 2017 to help another team win in 2018. Wow, what does he do in that? Is that something, what do you do in that scenario? How is he not protective? You'd naturally be responsive to that.
Yeah, I mean, he's been doing that for, years now. A lot of his coaches go on to coach other teams. It's actually kind of funny. His assistants are notoriously poor as head coaches in the future. If you look at who his assistants were and they go on to coach, a lot of them end up being head coaches in the NCAA. They coach college teams, and they're notoriously bad. One of the only good ones would be Nick Saban, obviously, who's built a dynasty at Alabama. But a lot of his assistant coaches have been really poor after they've left. But yeah, I think part of his the awe of what Belichick is doing is the fact that he is winning still. He'll lose these coaches that built up their strategy for a year, and he's still going to beat them the next year. There was an old saying that he'll take yours and beat his own, or he'll take his and beat yours. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what he's got. He's going to take whatever he's got and find a way to make it successful. And it's honestly, the craziest thing is that he's doing it in the NFL today, where, I mean, look at Major League Baseball. There's no parity in Major League Baseball. You've got millions and millions of dollars in the Yankees and the Red Sox and whatever. And then you've got my team, the San Diego Padres, who are worth a dime. And we're never going to win. We don't have the money to win. If you look at the NFL, there's salary caps, there's profit sharing, and the league is built for competitiveness. So the way the NFL draft works, where NFL teams pick college players, the best team that year gets the last pick in the draft. So the worst teams get the best players. And the NFL is designed to be competitive. It's an entertainment industry, so they want that. And the fact that he's able to win through this parity of they're trying to balance it out, and he's still staying on top. Despite they get better players, his coaches get poached, he doesn't get more money. Everybody gets a pretty balanced flow of cash, and he's still able to turn his team into a winner year after year.
Yeah, that's kind of the reason I'm talking to you about this, because in that sense, this is a perfectly designed experiment, whether it's economic or research based. That is a perfect experiment because things are so controlled between 32 different teams.
Mm-hmm.
So how do the wheels fall off on?
It is.
How do wheels fall off on like the Browns? You got to laugh at the Browns a little bit because they get all the first round picks and they're just whiffing on everything. What's going on there?
The Browns are interesting, and the funny part of that is, do you know who the Browns head coach was from 1990 to 1995?
No.
It was Bill Belichick. So Belichick was his first head coaching job was for the Cleveland Browns, and he essentially had a terrible time there. Management screwed him. He wasn't given control. He wanted certain coaches, certain players. They told him he would get it. They changed things on him. He had a lot of bad stuff go on when he was with the Browns. And I think that's part of why you're seeing the Browns are still awful today. I think they've got a lot of management issues, and they're not willing to give a head coach the reins. So when Belichick took the job in New England, he went to Robert Kraft and said, I will take this job on several conditions. I'm the head coach. I'm also the head of player operations. I'm the head of hiring and firing my assistant coaches. I'm the head of who we're going to pick in every draft. I'm in charge. You're here to pay the bills and collect the money, but I'm going to be in charge of us winning, and I'm going to I get to make every decision, and you get to sit back and watch. If you trust me, you'll hire me and we'll do this. And if you don't, I'm not taking the job. And Robert Kraft is obviously a great businessman, and he gave him full reign on the Patriots, and it's turned out to be one of his best investments.
Could you imagine the nervousness of the first 2 years on both parties, though? That's a lot on the line right there.
It is. I mean, look at it. He has he has his starting quarterback get hurt in his first year, Drew Bledsoe. They've got a starting quarterback. They draft Tom Brady, who's this shrimpy, weak, ugly-looking kid out of Michigan who, I don't know if you've watched his NFL draft combine. It's embarrassing. And they draft this kid. Belichick knows he's going to be good. And then the first year, Bledsoe goes down, gets hurt, and they bring in this kid. So yeah, I would definitely be nervous if I was Robert Kraft at first, but now he knows he's got a winner.
Yeah, that's it. And that word winner, I mean, that's a quality of a person. Some people just kind of seem not to have the winning quality, whatever combination it is.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of it's like the Tim Tebow effect. He's a winner, like when he was at the Florida Gators playing football, he won. He just won every time. And then when he got to the NFL, he wasn't good enough to play. So he played fullback. And then when he finally got his chance to play quarterback with the Broncos, he won a playoff game, which is unheard of. Backup quarterbacks don't win playoff games. Then again, you've got Nick Foles winning playoff games right now, but his team is amazing. So,
and so what's projected for, if we're going to stick on Belichick, let's finish off play out the dynasty. What happens for him? So he loses his 2 coach. Brady's 40. How old is he? He must be like 70?
He's not 70. I want to say he's like early 60s.
Okay. So where does he go? What happened?
So I don't know if you guys watch like ESPN or anything like that. I don't know if you guys have that in Australia, if that's a thing. But we've got, ESPN here. Everybody watches ESPN. It's where you get your sports. And one of the recent conversations was things are tense between Brady and Belichick. Their relationship is getting strained and they don't like each other very much or something like that. And Teddy Bruschi, who's an old linebacker for the Patriots, won a Super Bowl with the Patriots. He now commentates for SportsCenter. Teddy Bruschi said, that doesn't mean a single thing. Belichick was always on edge with his players. Their locker room was intentionally made to be tense all the time. It was always tense. That's why they never had a down game, because you're never complacent. You're never happy. Belichick would win a game by 40, get in the locker room the next day, and berate his players for the mistakes they made in that game and tell them they had to be better. A lot of coaches won't do that. So, like, hearing that Brady and Belichick were fighting or whatever and things are tense, that doesn't mean a single thing to me. I mean, who knows? Brady is getting older. Some sort of injury happens and Brady's gone. I don't think Belichick's leaving. I think he wants a couple more rings. And I think he will. I think he's got a system in place in New England. It's exactly that. It's a system. It's not players. He can get rid of players and still win. And it'll be interesting to see what players he goes with in the next couple of years, if he can keep Brady or what. But I think Belichick he's gonna retire on a Super Bowl win. He's not gonna retire before that.
Beautiful. Okay, let's leave it there. So thank you so much for coming on the show and giving us the lowdown on that.
All right, man.
I'll see you later.
Thanks for inviting me to talk.
Well, that's all we have time for this week. Thank you for listening to the UniV podcast. To follow our series, please subscribe to our channel via iTunes, Beyond Pod, or the equivalent service. And if you particularly enjoyed the show, please don't forget to rate. For further information, news, videos, and articles, head to univ.com.au.